everyone. That was a terrible start. Hi, everyone. Glad that you could be with me. This is the first effort that I've put together to do this thing, I think, which is kind of like streamed consciousness, if you like, to talk about things generally that are on my mind and which are probably only relevant to me, not necessarily relevant to you. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to do something a little bit different for me, which is a streamed consciousness thing. Now, normally, as some of you may or may not be aware, my name's Tony Tonkin. I'm the founder of the Child Protection Party, and often we do live feeds and YouTube feeds to the Child Protection Party page, and we generally just have a conversation about things that are relating specifically to child protection. And so some of you may be familiar with some of that stuff. But today I wanted to just have a conversation about nothing in particular. So it's kind of like a Seinfeld episode. And just wanted to talk about whatever it was that comes to my mind. I realised today when I was having a conversation with my wife that there was plenty to talk about and plenty of issues that are relevant that we all need to be discussing, or that I at least need to be discussing with you. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you want to participate by ringing the bell and doing the subscribe thing. I had a graphics actually I put up on one of my other live feeds that I should be starting to use in relation to this as well. But I guess one of the things I've been thinking about in relation to most of the work that I do, which is about helping families navigate the child protection system, and the work I generally do as a social worker, working with people around a range of issues from family violence to relationships to child abuse type issues, to dealing with domestic violence. I am an accredited mental health social worker, so working with people around those issues have also been important to me. One of the most important things, though, is to look at, I guess, the way we filter our world and how the things that have impacted us as children are impacting us as adults. And so sometimes it just appears to me to be able to have a look at the areas in our lives that have impacted us. And I was reminded of this when I was thinking of a client I've been working with who specifically talked about how his relationship is impacting him and how he fails to understand, I guess, the impact. How can I best put it? This is some time ago, so this isn't terribly current. So I'm hoping like hell that particular person won't be watching this, even though I think a lot of this stuff actually applies to many people out there. But the issue was that the way he has interpreted his world has impacted how he wants to be loved within his relationship. And I think this is an issue that impacts lots and lots of people, and it's not based on socioeconomic background. It's really based on the degree to which you believe that you were loved when you were growing up. And and this guy's not alone. He's just kind of somebody that came to mind recently because it seems to be a continuing issue for men to think about, how was love expressed to me when I was growing up, whether it was enough. And I found that when I was describing this to someone recently, I found myself saying it's almost like the bucket is empty, that there's this hole that never gets filled. And it came to mind, strangely enough, because I was thinking about, believe it or not, Donald Trump. Not my most favourite person, and I'm more than happy to admit that that is not, that there are other people in the world, I think, that have got more to offer than what he has. But it was a reference to a relative who I think is a cousin writing a book recently about him and expressing the idea that he's kind of empty of any emotion. And I started to think of that in terms of lots of clients and what that means. And someone said to me, well, does that mean that I see Donald Trump as in a different light if I think about how it might have been for him growing up? You know, to be honest, I see him as quite evil. So, and there'll be lots of people who may eventually watch this video and think, well, that's a bit harsh, but it is kind of like how I see him. But is it possible to see him differently? Is it possible to see him as this little kid who so desperately wanted to be loved and found that he was never getting the degree of love and affection that he needed? And he certainly didn't get it from his father, even though I suppose he did get something from his mum. I don't know the in-depth detail. You know, I've been blessed because I've never had to meet Donald Trump. Don't ever wish to. But it did remind me, though, that there are lots of people out there who have this kind of empty well, this pit that they can never fulfill. And then I thought of this client and lots of other people too that I've worked with over the years who have this big hole that they're trying to fill. And in order to do so, they're making demands of other people in their lives to be loved by them in a way that uniquely fits with and uniquely suits the person that they're intending to get to love them, I guess. And what it does do is it means their demands for love and affection are so unreasonable that no matter what the other person does for them, it will never fill that hole. Never. And someone asked me recently, you know, how do you work with people like that? What can you do? And it occurred to me that sometimes perhaps we don't investigate enough the past stuff and help people to realise how deep that hole is. Because if they realised how deep it was, maybe they could find ways to fill it appropriately by at least understanding the things that they were missing and how they can have those things brought into their existence right now, I guess. So I guess what it did tell me was that we need to find ways to understand the depth of despair that children particularly might have felt when they were not loved as they needed to be loved. And sometimes, you know, the need for that is quite simple. You know, like sometimes kids just need to be told that they're okay. So they don't need to be told that they're great or that they're geniuses or that they're brilliant, but they need to be told that they're okay and that they're living with people who will protect them and that within that environment they feel safe. And what interests me about people like Trump and other people that I've worked with over the years who have been relatively wealthy is that it doesn't matter what socioeconomic position you have, people still, in many environments, feel so unloved, so uncared for by their parents that they demand unreasonable, or they have unreasonable expectations from the people whom they expect to love them. And as a result of that, those people learn in the end not to stand for the behaviours exhibited by the person who needs to be loved, but in fact they fall out of love with them because their behaviours are so atrocious. And I had this this. So it occurred to me that I had this one particular person I worked with who did absolutely everything for her kids and for her partner, and was the most dedicated individual you could imagine in terms of wanting to help people and wanting to help her partner, and felt responsible, I guess, at some level for the despair that the partner felt about not being loved enough, and she wondered what in the hell, what can I do that's going to cause this person to at least feel loved by me? And it was as deep as the hole that he had to fill. It was impossible to be able to ever offer at any reasonable level the things that he needed most out of this relationship. And so was it ever going to be filled? No, it probably wasn't, and it would never be filled until such time as he decided to find ways to fill that hole himself. And that's a really, that's a shocking place for a lot of these people to travel, because they there's a lot of emotions, and there's a lot of a sense of loss in that pit, and that they need to be able to fill that by at least understanding where those losses were and how painful it was for them not to be loved by the very people in their lives who should have loved them the most. And I find it somewhat sad that there are so many of those people, and when I think about, like what is it that caused all of that, like what happened for those parents that caused them to not pay enough, or not to have enough understanding as to how they were parenting and the impact that was having on their kids. And in my world, when I'm working with a lot of parents whose kids have been removed, I think of, there's this socioeconomic grouping of individuals who are poverty-stricken, they're uneducated, whatever, and child protection system looks down on them and thinks, well, because you come from this sort of environment, you kind of got to be a crappy parent anyway. And then I know that there are so many people out there who do come from, financially substantial environments, and who do go to the best schools, and there's all this other group of people who are like these people that I talk about, where they just don't have any, they still don't have the love. They might have all the financial support, and they might have all the things. They might live in a good home, they might be well fed, they might have a good social network, whatever it is. But there's still this hole. And that, later on, when these kids grow up to be adults, they start behaving in ways that make people wonder, well, why in the hell is this happening? Like, this person came from a good family, whatever that means, and that they should be grateful for all that they've had. They've had a good education. They are a professional themselves, yet they have lousy relationships, or they treat people badly generally. And a lot of these people, frankly, just become bullies because they don't know how to love themselves. They don't know how to appreciate others. They don't know how to express their emotions and feelings appropriately. So in order to fill that hole, they then tend to want to have to be more powerful and authoritative, yell and scream and shout at others when they're not getting their own way. And as a result of that, they might appear to be successful in business because they command things and they have the education required and all the other sort of stuff that goes with it. But at the end of the day, they are left wanting, because deep down, they're really sad people. really, really sad. And as a result of that sadness and that well that they've created, they are not able to have any of the relationships that they want. And then they have children who become just as void of emotions as what they are, because they don't know how to express those emotions. They expect their children to be able to love them unconditionally, even though they might be treated badly by the parent. And then they wonder, well, I've been able to offer all this. And the cycle just continues on for these families and for these kids. And so in my world, I see so much of this happening within a society or a group of people, where I can understand really where this comes from, because poverty in particular breeds a whole host of inequities and inadequacies in a sense. But then I know that it exists also amongst all these other groups of people where poverty is not a problem, and where, a lot of these kids that come from, supposedly good families, not really, but supposedly these good families, wind up with, they just wind up destroyed. And they continue the cycle. And, I always believe too that because you come from so I do apologise for this, folks. I keep coming back to child protection stuff, but I have noticed that that within child protection, or the child protection issues, where they focus on a lot of people that are in these low socioeconomic groups, there are lots of issues that sit with people also in all of these other areas as well. That there are a lot of people, who have been neglected, a lot of kids that have been neglected by their parents, and that no one cares about them because, they come from well-to-do families, or they're middle class or whatever, and therefore they're not that important. And they just, so there's this, to me, there's this bank of people that are ignored. I have an issue with the way we focus on people from low socioeconomic background. Anybody that's watched any of my stuff will know that. But I also have a problem with this group of people who do not come under the surveillance of child protection services, or anybody else for that matter, because they are perceived as being okay or sufficient enough, or having enough resources to deal with their issues. But that group of people still go out and harm others. They become, well, there's a group of people, I guess, that kind of become psychopathic or sociopathic, and they, because they had nothing offered to them around emotional well-being when they were growing up, they then go out and abuse other people. But that abuse seems to be justified because they're well-educated or they have money. So I guess that was a rant that's been going for 18 minutes now that I didn't expect. And I hope that over time we can have kind of more of these conversations. They're just an opportunity for me to talk about stuff that I guess has been weighing on my mind. The other thing I want to just talk about, so I plan to make these about 20 minutes, so I'm almost there, but I plan to, I'm having a real struggle now with the hostility that sits out there around politics. The fact that we don't have it so much in Australia, but I can kind of see it coming, and I often feel it. We did a post on Facebook the other day around Pauline Hanson. And I know this has been lingering for a while because the right wing seem to have so much influence and so much power, and it's not the it's not that I have an issue with the right of politics at all. I have an issue with the politics of racism, inequity, unfairness, abusive language, descriptions of others that are unhelpful, the lack of empathy and understanding as to the experiences of others. And, we experienced that with the lockdown in Victoria, where, Hanson in particular came out and said some really nasty things about the people that were in the high-rise residential units. And I'm wondering how we become more tolerant. Like, had a debate with Avery recently where he was saying everybody's got the right to say whatever they want to say, and we should be able to respect that right. And I've heard that argument from the right wing over time, in particular, and realised that that I don't disagree with the fact that people need to say whatever it is they need to say, but they need to be able to do it in ways that are relatively respectful of other people. And we can challenge views, whether we believe in God or not, or whether we believe in climate change or not, or as a discussion Avery and I will be having shortly around nuclear energy, whether we believe in that or not. We're all entitled to have our views, and we're all entitled to be able to support those views through whatever means we have available to us. But it's okay to disagree. But it's not okay, I don't think, to create hostility towards another group of people that might think or believe differently, that may look differently, that may have a different set of values and principles than we do. So I think we need to be very careful, or otherwise we're going to wind up being hostile against everybody. And the cultural wars that are happening in the US are just as likely to flow over to Australia, whether that be cultural wars politically, or whether that even be cultural wars in terms of race, and how we view ourselves. And perhaps this is a discussion for another time, but I really do think at some point we need to have a conversation about the damage that we've done to Indigenous people and our own history in relation to them, and what is it that we as a society are going to do in order to rectify some of those damages that we have done. So I'm hoping that those of you that do have an opportunity to view this video, that you will do so, and that you will subscribe to Things That Matter, and that you will watch patiently for any future videos that we have. I plan to do one at least once a day, and have a conversation with you. And I'd really like to have that conversation back, so I get to know how you think and feel about some of the things that I'm talking about as well. So thanks everybody for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you later on. Take care. Look after yourselves. Be safe.